What's up, everybody? It's Brian J. with another Horror Reanimated, the show where we take horror movies or unused concepts and we try to rework them or discuss the ideas that never came to fruition and hit the cutting room floor. You can reach me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at bshowbrian, and you can email me, bshowbrian@gmail.com. So, this week, we're talking about A Final Girl. A couple years ago, February was Women in Horror Month, and I wanted to do something along those lines. But I didn't want to do something cheesy like... we'll eventually I'll do like an Expendables of horror. And obviously one of the options is, all the Final Girls, right? So, eventually we'll do something like that. But not tonight. Tonight I wanted to do something a little different. And I was reading up on one of my favorite horror movies, Friday the 13th Part 3. I have always heard the idea that Ginny was originally supposed to come back, the survivor from Halloween 2. And I had heard the original idea, and you may not know this, that Ginny was supposed to come back for 3. They were going to set it in a mental institution as she recovered from her attack from Jason. And then much like Halloween 2, he would track her down. And I've heard that for years. That's one of those... maybe I should do a horror history video on it because I know not everyone knows that. But that's one of those ideas that I think horror fans have heard for years. And I was kind of interested in that one, but again, we've seen that before with Halloween 2, and I was looking for something a little different. But then I saw, when I was researching this, that there was another idea where Ginny would be in college finishing her psychology degree, and she would find, much like, what's her name, from Friday the 13th, Alice from Friday the 13th, at the beginning of Part 2, finds the head of Mrs. Voorhees in the refrigerator. Much in the same vein, in this version of Part 3, Ginny would find Paul, her boyfriend, dead in her, what's it called? Not condo, shit. Dead in her, why can I not think of this? It's where kids go when they're in college and they freaking live. Dorm, yes. Christ almighty. She would find Paul dead in her dorm, and then it would kind of set off this whole thing, and Jason's coming for her. And she's going crazy. So that actually spoke to me a little bit more. I got more interested in it as I read that. And if you don't know, obviously Amy Steele played Ginny from Friday the 13th Part 2. She was the first final girl to go up against Jason and live. Jason in his sackhead form. My wife has been working so many hours lately that when I walked up and told her goodnight last night, she had like one eye open. She's laying on the bed and had no expression on her face. And today I actually told her she looked like Baghead Jason. Just one eye open, just staring at me. Good night. I feel bad for that woman. She's married to me. But anyway, I'm sure a lot of people do. But anyway, Ginny was the first final girl to run up against Jason. And she ended up surviving. Buried a machete in his shoulder. And again, I think that she was a psychology major. And she used that psychology to survive. She's the one who put on Mrs. Voorhees' sweater. Tucked her hair in and said, "Mommy is pleased with you. You can stop now." And then when he was distracted, she tried to bury a machete in his shoulder. Jason will never trust another woman other than Mommy for the rest of his life. It all started there. Anyway, so I thought it'd be interesting. She's always been one of my favorites. Nothing against Chris Higgins from Part 3, but I don't know. I always was partial to Ginny. She always seemed like a little bit more of a badass. So, there's a couple things to note in this film. And I always, when I think of these ideas, like what would happen? I always think, what would happen, right? You start with, you don't want it to be just your standard Laurie Strode clone. You don't want to go that way. And a lot of the ideas that I've had for the show, that's been where my mind has gone because it's what you know. It's your experience. So I thought about doing what's it called? A Jamie Lloyd, kind of a Jamie's Revenge type thing. I didn't want to do that this month because it just felt like Laurie Part 2. Ginny's a little bit different. So I was trying to think of like what would happen. So she's a psychology major. She goes to college. She's trying to get back on with her life. And the interesting thing I thought about was if she is in college as opposed to in a mental institution, she would still kind of the same treatment. But in college, she would be more free. It would be more open. In the film, I think that was one of the problems with Halloween 2 was Laurie was in the hospital. And it was just Michael's coming to get her. She was kind of immobile, wasn't really doing anything. Where would Ginny be? What would she be doing? Group therapy, and Jason's in the other room killing people. I mean, it's kind of tough. So I was thinking of just what would happen, and it was kind of interesting. Like, if she would have gone back to Crystal Lake and been around camp counselors, she might have had some people that kind of listened to her and believed her story. She might have had some people that dismissed her, but still kind of in a way believed, like they were still spooked by it. But if she's around all these other psychology eggheads that are taught, by trade to be, I don't want to say doubting, but like they're taught that these people are hallucinating, that they're having breakdowns, that their memories from the past, their fears, it's just post-traumatic stress disorder. No one is going to take her seriously. And that to me was really an interesting thought, because here would be Ginny. She's a survivor. She knows she's come out on the other end of a really tough ordeal, but she still has this baggage. And now, instead of having people around her that believe her when she thinks Jason's coming and who would protect her, there's probably a lot of people around her that would tell her she's crazy, which is kind of the exact opposite of what she would really want. So I think there'd be a lot of skeptical people around her, which would be really interesting and set up, more scenarios for Jason to pick people off. So another thing too, speaking of survival, is there were 2 other survivors depending on how you feel about the movie. Obviously, some people think Paul, her boyfriend, survived. And again, that was maybe one of the plans for an original Part 3. But remember, Ted survived. Ted was the goofy redheaded guy. The 3 of them went to the bar. And then when Paul and Ginny went to go home, Ted stayed behind to try to find an after hours club. He wasn't done drinking. So now Ted's alive. So is he going to come back? So now you have 3 familiar faces, and you could always have Ted as a suspect, because like what would Ted have done? Right? He's hammered. He has to find a way back. I think he had the truck, right? I think he had the truck of his 2 friends that went with them. In fact, I don't remember their names, but they were the ones who got caught wandering around looking for Crystal Lake. They got caught by the police. They got brought back, and then they're the ones who actually got killed, ironically, by the spear that Ted had earlier in the movie when he dressed up and wore the mask to scare everybody. It was that spear that he had that ended up Jason used to do them in. So you could always, Ted maybe could be a suspect. They never found Jason. And if you think back to the end of Part 1, Alice was like, "Where's the boy? Where's the boy? Ma'am, we didn't find any boy." So would the police have believed Ginny? They didn't find Jason's body. Maybe they found the shed. Maybe they found the other bodies of the victims that were in there. Alice and Mrs. Voorhees' head. Because common sense would say if when the police came to get Ginny and they took her to the hospital, she would say, "Oh, there was a shack and this is where we wound up," right? So But would law enforcement have taken her seriously? And look at Ted. And Paul was there early too. So would they have thought it was Paul? Well, no, because Paul has an alibi. So, but that's what I'm saying is, you could work it in different ways. But I think you could also do, and again, I'm just thinking through ideas here as I talk about a potential Ginny starring part 3. So I'm thinking through different scenarios in this. And with Ginny, would the police have believed her? I don't know. They didn't believe Alice. So maybe they're keeping an eye on her. Maybe the 3 of them were in on it. Maybe Paul and Ginny murdered everyone when they came back to camp. I think there are a number of different things different directions you could go on in a film like this, especially with a sequel. So if you took the second one with Paul and Ginny, as I was saying. So, it's Ted too. It would make sense if Ted got rid of bodies or would help them out, because no one knew where Ted, Ginny, and Paul were. They were all at the bar. So they could stick together, and that's their alibi story. But is it really true? And can the police believe them? Then again, I guess you could say that they were seen by people. But again, when Paul and Ginny go back and Ted's looking for the after hours club, there's your opportunity right there. Also, I mentioned Paul punishing 2 of the other people, making them go back or stay behind at camp instead of going out that night. You could also play off of that with some survivor's guilt with Paul. And even Ginny, like all these people. I don't know if she even knew anybody. I don't know if she was friends with anybody, or if Paul just asked her to come out and do it because Paul was her boyfriend. But you could have tremendous survivor guilt. Like, why am I still here? All these people are dead. I'm here. Had I been there, had I not gone out drinking, maybe I would have been dead too. So again, there's a lot of different... that always attracts me to stories like this. I know traditionally sequels have not been as regarded as the original films, especially in movies like this where it just kind of becomes watered down as time goes on. But I also think that is one of the strongest points of sequels like this, is you have an opportunity to explore different characters and to explore maybe how different characters reacted in certain situations. You have some time. You can change the way characters are. They've developed differently. They've changed because of the ordeal they've gone through. So now, like, take a character like Ginny. She's always smart. She was always resourceful. She was strong. She was a fighter. But now she's gone through this ordeal with Jason. And she's come out on the other end. And she's survived. And now she's a little hardened, probably. So how's that going to change her? How would she react differently in this situation? And Jason has gone up against her and not killed her. So how's Jason going to change his game? So that's what I'm saying, is you can go into all these different possibilities instead of just staying, oh, we're going to stay at Crystal Lake, and oh, it's going to be a new crop of counselors, and oh, it's going to be the same thing, just different. My friend Brian says it all the time. It's like the same but different. It's like, well, then, okay. But yeah, like, what do you do? I don't know. I mean, obviously, the one weakness I could see with a movie like this, which is probably why they decided to just keep going back to Crystal Lake because it worked, is if you go to a college, how is Jason going to be operating? Like in Crystal Lake, he has the woods. That's his home turf. He's kind of protecting his turf. But he not just that, he can blend in with the trees. He can hang out in the brush. In the thicket, as they say. He has cover. He has natural camouflage. So Jason has the freedom to roam around and to spy and to watch and to observe and to study. So he can watch these people. Okay, this person's careless. Not to say Jason was a genius in the first place, but okay, he can see the different patterns. Like, this person's not paying attention. This person's high. This person's, really aware of what's going on. This person's looking around. So Jason is hunting, essentially. He's out in the woods and he's hunting his prey, and they're not aware of it. But he's out there and he's getting ready. He's setting his traps and he's studying his prey like a hunter will study an animal or track an animal. That's what Jason's doing. So how does he do that in a college setting? There's dorms, there's quads, there's open areas. So I think that's one of the weaknesses. Like, he can't blend in. I mean, he could dress he could dress like a janitor, but he's not going to be walking up and down the hallways with his, he's going to stick out. He's going to be noticed if he's hanging around. So that's the one thing I don't know if you can get past. The one thing I do like about it, though, is it's almost like a playground. There's auditoriums, there's different buildings, any number of buildings. There's lecture halls, there's conference halls, there's conference rooms, there's probably a basketball arena, there's a swimming pool. So there's, again, any number of different ways. Like, if I'm a producer or a writer for a Jason movie, and I'm tasked with sitting around and like thinking up kills, it would be so easy to do. It would be so fun to do if he was going to be let loose on a college campus. Oh, there's a pool and there's tennis courts. I mean, like, and some of it would resemble in some ways campground. There's some stuff he's going to be familiar with. Maybe a pool, tennis courts, archery. But now there's a bell tower. And that could be interesting too. Ginny's freaking out. It's close to the anniversary. It's been a couple years. She's been like seeing some shadows and, isn't my mind playing tricks on me? Am I just freaking out? And then, someone's hung from the bell tower. Of course, campus police come in. Oh, it's just drugs. It's this, it's that. Suicide. He was lonely. She was lonely. Just broke up with her boyfriend, blah, blah, blah. And then it happens again, and there's more and more stuff that happens, right? So I don't know. I mean, like I said, auditoriums. And they kind of did that in Scream. I think it was Scream 2. But again, that killer was able to blend in because it's someone it's a normal human being in a mask. It's not a hulking, deranged, demented, like disfigured person. That person's going to stand out stalking around the hallways. So does Jason, almost like Michael Myers in Halloween 2? Does he stay in the shadows, in and out of buildings, following her as she goes? Killing people that like discover him until he sets traps for people? I don't know. It's a Friday, so are people leaving for parties and taking off campus? I mean, that'd be a page from the Kristen Smart case. That's, a huge podcast right now is, what's it called? Your Own Backyard. It's a really good show. Christopher, what's his name? I gotta plug him. Let me grab my stuff here. In case you're listening and you like true crime, this dude's podcast was awesome. I gotta find it here in my podcast addict. But no, it basically, he brought new light to the investigation of the Kristen Smart case, a girl who disappeared from Cal Poly back in like 96. Chris Lambert. Check him out. It's a really good show. But basically, she went to a party on a Friday. It was Labor Day weekend or Memorial Day weekend. So there was almost nobody at the school. And she was there. She went to a party. She was drunk. She's barely awake. blacked out, I guess. And some friends walked her home, left her with a guy to walk her the last of the way, and then she disappears. So that's like ripped from that headline, right? So maybe it's a holiday weekend, there's some parties, but Ginny's not leaving. She's staying with her friends. Staying with people who she thinks she'll be safe around. And then Jason shows up. So in that sense, I think if Jason hung out and watched her and figured out where she was at and going, it would be like a cross between Halloween 2 and Halloween 4. The beginning of Halloween 4 when he goes to the house and then he's in the back of the car. So I think that's not Jason's style, though. Jason snuck around, but he was much more brutal. So I think that's the only thing, again, that's the only thing kind of I'm trying to figure out in my head is, would that be an issue? It's probably one of the weaknesses of this idea, which, again, was probably why they just set it in Crystal Lake. But again, lots of opportunities for unique kills with a lot of the different settings of a college campus. Can you imagine Jason? And I'm thinking part 3 hockey mask Jason, obviously, because they ended up doing it anyway. Jason walking into a college party. You reveal him with that hockey mask and you just start slaughtering people. And you could do a lot of the same kills. Like you got, I'm trying to think, there's the dude who walks on his hands after they have sex. And Jason waits for him outside the shower, and hacks him while he's upside down. You could do that one. You could do the eyeball pop with the head squeeze. You could do electrocutions. I mean, essentially what part 3 was a bunch of college-age kids going to party in a cabin on a lake. Or close to a lake, right? Yeah, it was on a lake. So if you remove the lake and you remove the cabin and put them in a college setting, it's the same thing. There's going to be people getting high. There's going to be people making popcorn because the 3D thing. There's going to be people having sex. It's going to be a Friday the 13th movie. I mean, or a slasher movie. But set in a college, I guess. It's not all that different other than the setting. And after this is the 3rd movie now, it might be time to freshen things up a little bit. But I don't know. And I was even thinking of this too, is like if you did part 3 with Ginny at college, Paul winds up dead, Ginny faces off with Jason, doesn't die, but when the cops get there, everyone's dead except for Ginny. And no one saw Jason other than Ginny and the people that died. Almost like in Chucky movies, like everyone that sees Chucky dies. So there's no, other than the first film, obviously. But no one's willing to say that Chucky was there, right? So in this case, you have this traumatized survivor who for the past couple days was saying she was seeing things and hearing things, and everyone was saying she's crazy. So now, with a skeleton crew of people around, all these people end up dying, including her boyfriend. And she's the only one there, and she's the only one that survives. And then maybe they take her away. And then now part 4 would be Jason over the Cuckoo's Nest or whatever it is. So you do a Ginny trilogy. So the first one was them at camp and they're surviving. And then the next one is Ginny in college. And then, and even just to make sense, maybe people did see Jason, but maybe Jason wasn't around when she killed Paul. So the police are like, did she kill Paul? Did she not? Again, they could go in a million different directions with it. But yeah, then you go, maybe part 4, you go to the asylum. And now you're trapped inside and she thinks she's at least safe. But Jason finds out where she is and finds a way in. The thing with Halloween 2 that a lot of people didn't like was that it looked like a deserted hospital. There was nobody there. And it just winds up being this dark hospital where Laurie's all by herself. Like, what kind of hospital is this? In this case, you could always, with it being a psychiatric hospital, you could say that like some weird shit started happening, and so that the inmates didn't get out, someone locked down the entire hospital. And then after locking down the hospital, you locked Jason in with all the inmates. So now the inmates are, maybe they're free to roam, almost like in a space movie. Like there's an airlock, and they can't get out. Maybe you have a common area, and you have individual rooms that are open because maybe they were in the process of like trying to find out where these people were. I mean, you could do anything. But like, you know, maybe staff tries to lock down the hospital and get everyone back to their rooms, and there's this one wing that Jason gets trapped in for the climax of the movie, or for the second, you know, into the second act. First act, some wonky shit happens. Second act, stuff starts picking up, and they lock down the hospital, but then Jason has killed people on the outside. Now he's locked in the hospital. They could really do anything. Or Ginny goes back, almost like, you know, part 7 with Tina. Maybe instead of all that crap, Ginny has completed her degree, and to get over what happened in part 3, she goes back to Crystal Lake. And she doesn't tell anybody she's going. She goes by herself. Or maybe she takes a group of people with her. This is going to be good for you. Yeah, almost like the new Evil Dead. The girl goes to detox. They take her to the cabin in the middle of nowhere. But she's got a group of people. She's like, this ain't a good idea. And maybe Jason can sense she's there. I don't know. Maybe he sees her. And then everything starts happening again. So, I don't know. I like part 3. It's a really good movie. It's iconic and gave us the hockey mask. But I always thought Ginny was a stronger character than Chris Higgins. Yeah, nothing against Chris Higgins, but Ginny just seemed like, with the psychology background, Chris was already traumatized. She had a run-in with Jason. She may or may not have been sexually assaulted, which is freaky to think about. So she's already had that shock, and she survives. In the original cut, she was, you know, they filmed an ending where she was killed. But, I don't know, Ginny just being the original, having the psych background, always seemed like a better final girl to me in that sense. So it would have been interesting to see her come back. I just had another idea for an Expendables of horror. Oh man. No, I don't want to go into it now. I'm not going to go into it now. I might have already said all there is to say about Ginny and Friday the 13th Part 3. Let's see, anything else? Anything else? No, I don't really think so, because I don't want to sit here and like write a whole movie. And I think there's enough that was already discussed to kind of get other people thinking. What do you guys think? What would you do? You got part 3. You have, you know, Amy Steele coming back to reprise her role. It's not just going to be in a cameo or to be killed off in the beginning. What would you do? Where would you set it? Would you go back to Crystal Lake? Let me know. bshowbrian@gmail.com. You can also find me at bshowbrian on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. My goal is to put a couple of these up at a time, 3 or 4 of them at a time. Who knows if I'll get there. I'm just going to do what I feel like doing from now on. Hopefully you guys enjoy this. So if you do, leave me some feedback. Make sure to subscribe and leave me a review wherever you listen to this podcast. It helps with visibility, helps us attract more listeners. But the last thing I want to do is belabor these and draw them out too far. So my name is Brian J. This is Horror Reanimated.